Hey Internet, Jesse at Ish Guitars. I am here today with the 2022 PRS Acoustic SE lineup. We're going to get totally in depth and I'm going to attempt to be your spiritual guidance to the perfect new PRS acoustic guitar. So we are going to play these guitars and we are going to talk about some of the details and the differences. Here we go. First, the similarities. All of these guitars actually have solid spruce tops, with the exception of the P20E. That has mahogany top, but we'll get to that later. All of these guitars have ebony bridges and fretboards, which especially, once again, in the case of the P20, because it's only $549, really, really cool at that price point. Next, we have the electronic system. This is new for 2022, updated to a Fishman Sonitone system that is actually designed, it's voiced, I should say, by PRS themselves, and it sounds a lot better, to be honest, than the last ones. The last one sounded good, this one's better. Also, these are all, it's good to mention, made in China at a fantastic factory. So this factory is so advanced, I was talking to Jack Higginbotham, the COO of PRS Guitars, and he said it's unlike almost any factory in the USA even. It's that advanced. Very high quality. You know, your iPhone's made in China in a fancy factory, so are these. Really cool. And lastly, these all have hard cases, except for the, once again, the P20 has a gig bag. And they're nice hard cases as well. Most importantly here is PRS's hybrid X bracing. So to explain it simply, we have to think about classical guitars actually. Now, when classical guitars were built, they, or still are built, they have nylon strings, which don't have very much tension to them, which means the top of the guitar can have less bracing on it. We call that a fan bracing in most cases in a classical. Now, that top on a classical moves around producing sound, just like on a steel string guitar. Well, the problem is in a steel string guitar, you need more bracing in order to combat the heavy tension coming from those steel strings. So Martin Guitars in the mid-1850s invented that X brace that was finally able to take the tension of those heavy steel strings. The problem is, it's a little bit of a compromise because the more bracing you put on that top, the less it's able to move up and down and the less it's able to produce really beautiful sound. It's a soundboard, it's like a speaker. So PRS's design, Paul Smith designed this himself, incorporates a bit of fanning, fan bracing below the bridge area on the guitar and has a light X brace above it. Try to get a best of both worlds so that you can get a steel string guitar that is loud and front forward projecting, but also when you go to a finger picking style, you can hear the nuance of the dynamic in the sound. It's actually a fantastic bracing. It's the same bracing that's used in all of the private stock guitars that we sell that are $10,000 plus. It's identical. Pretty great. So now let's talk about the differences. This is where it gets fun. So there's three body shapes in the SE lineup: the Parlor, the Tonare, and the Angelus. The two of these body shapes are only one singular model in the lineup, so let's get those ones out of the way first. As I hinted to before, the Parlor is the odd man out and the most different from the line. So this one is a small Parlor body shape, of course. It has a much different sonic goal than the other two guitars. As a small body guitar, it doesn't have a big bottom end. It's intentionally built that way. It has mahogany laminate back and sides and a solid mahogany top. And it's supposed to sound like a 1930s blues guitar. And it, I think, accomplishes that very well. It has a mid-range peak in it, and it really cuts through and gets that twang that you want associated with that style. These guitars start at only $549 for the non-electronic version. It's also the only guitar in the lineup that has a non-electronic version. Everything else comes with those Fishman electronics we talked about earlier. For a little bit more money, for $629, you can get it with the Fishman electronics, which I tend to highly recommend to everybody. But without further ado, we're going to hand this over to Jay Locke, our star Berkeley graduate, and he's going to show you how it sounds. The Tonare is the next one up in the lineup. Again, this is a singular guitar in the line, but it has a different body shape. This is much larger than the Parlor. This is, you know, your full-size type of acoustic shape. It's not as big as your typical Martin Dreadnought shape, but it's a little more comfortable than that. Non-cutaway, it's only offered as the T40 spec. So this has Ovencoal back and sides. It has cream binding, tiger acrylic purfling, which I love tiger acrylic purfling. I've used it actually on private stocks before. Mother of pearl bird inlays, and only comes in a tobacco sunburst finish. It's the only color. Fun side note is when these guitars were first released, I was down at the factory building some private stocks, and so they showed me these guitars and had me play them back to back without telling me which was which, so that I could give them feedback on how they sounded. My favorite sounding guitar in the lineup, including all the more expensive Angeluses, at the time they had other versions of the Tonare, was the T40 with the Ovencoal back and sides. Later in that day in a conversation, I discovered that Paul Reed Smith, when they had done the same thing to him, had the exact same reaction. Sonically, honestly, this is probably my favorite. It might not be the best fit for every application, but it does sound very, very good, even though it's not the most expensive one in the lineup. So, $749, street price, stunningly good for the money. Let's hand it over to Jay. Lastly, we have the Angelus guitars. This is what most people are probably looking at since it has a cutaway. The body shape is a little bit different than the Tonare. Now, mostly the only change with these guitars is the trim, aesthetically, and the woods on the back and sides. First up in the Angelus line is the A40. This one has Ovencoal back and sides, cream binding, tiger acrylic purfling, mother of pearl inlay, and it has two colors that are available, tobacco sunburst or a completely natural finish. If you like rosewood guitars, you're going to like this one. Ovencoal is very similar to rosewood sonically, and I think the A40 very well compares to a Taylor 414 CE. This is a guitar that's much more expensive, but used Ovencoal for quite a while. Now they've switched it to rosewood. You play them side by side, they're pretty darn similar, and I really like the PRS almost even more sometimes. This guitar is $799, and now we're going to hand it over to Jay to see what it sounds like. Second, we have the A50. This guitar goes to a flame maple back and sides. Black binding on this guy, so it's slightly different in the trim. Abalone purfling and inlay on the birds. And this one has a black gold burst back stained on that flame maple. You can also get it in a second variation that adds the burst to the top as well. If you like a little bit brighter guitar, of course this one's maple, so this one's going to fit the bill for you. Besides that, you know, just like the other one, it's trim and woods. Simple as that. $949 for this guy, of course, because it's a little bit fancier wood, a little bit fancier trim. Let's see how it sounds. Saving the best for last, this is the range topper. This is the A60 Zero Cody back and sides laminate, of course. We sell a lot of these guitars and they're stunning. So this guitar now has flame maple binding on the body, also now the neck and the headstock. So it looks like something that we'd spec in private stock, honestly. It has abalone binding, purfling around the body and abalone in the inlay. And it sounds really good. It's pretty and it sounds good and it looks good. So let's talk about Zero Cody because this is part of the why it looks so good. Zero Cody is a type of rosewood. Actually, I should say it is a rosewood. So the scientific genus name for rosewood is Dalbergia. Dalbergia then has a bunch of subspecies. So when you think of rosewood, a lot of times you talk about East Indian rosewood or maybe a Brazilian rosewood or Macassar rosewood. Well, also in there you have some things like Zero Cody and Hormigo. They're woods that I'm a big fan of. They are actually rosewoods, so they have a lot of those tonal qualities. They're a little bit different, of course, but Zero Cody looks so cool. This guitar is $1149, which I think is a steal of a deal, considering what's on it, the way it looks, the way it plays, the way it sounds. It's fantastic. This is a good seller. Listen to it, and then tell us what you think. So what did you think about the 2022 PRS acoustic lineup? Throw your comments below if you have any questions about anything we just talked about. Check the links for deeper dives into all of these instruments. We have a deeper dive on the Tonari and the Angelus and the Perlers and all these different things. And then also we want to know what brands you think we should compare these guitars to because they have some heavy hitter competition that they need to take on. That's about it. Subscribe. Like the video, share, do all those things that you're supposed to do on YouTube so that we can keep bringing you awesome videos. See you guys.